All right, welcome back to the RunThrough Trails Podcast with myself, James Tilley, and our regular co-host of NLC fame, Lewis Moses. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, James. Yeah, it doesn't seem that long ago that we saw each other because you were up here doing a bit of work and potential training, but you're back home now. So back to the usual pod.
I like the way you use the word back twice in those follow-up sentences because I couldn't do the training because of my back, which I guess we'll get back around to, which is annoying. And I just used the word back again. But I thought, first of all, I mentioned we're in slightly different places. We've both been displaced. You're in a different meeting room in the office and I'm in a art studio in a pottery cafe down the road from my house. And I've been informed that there's a live drawing class happening in about 50 minutes. So yeah, we've got a bit of a strict time schedule today.
We have indeed. Yeah, we've moved offices since December and January. And I'm actually trying to set up a little bit of a podcast studio at home in our spare room. So, well, the little room in the house. And I've got a bit of work to do this weekend. But yeah, I'm going to have a go at kind of converting it into a little office stroke podcast room. So next time we're live on here, maybe I'll be in an even newer podcast studio. But we'll see how that goes. Depends how good my handiwork is, isn't it?
Nice. Yeah, well, 100%. All right, cool. Well, let's dive in. Let's do a little bit of a recap because we did miss a podcast over the holidays, but we're back. So that's all that matters. Episode 15, ticking along nicely. First thing I wanted to mention was something that we chatted about last week, which was an enormous thing for runner retreats and obviously New Levels and you and Gemma and the whole team, which was having Paula Radcliffe down to Loughborough to do an academy. It was the first ever, I think, Paula Radcliffe marathon training day, or maybe you can talk a little bit about it, how things went. I know it was mega icy, but you also had big turn-up numbers and stuff. So yeah, how was it? I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, incredible. We're still on a bit of a high, still buzzing from the weekend. It was the first ever, Paula Radcliffe Marathon Workshop. You know, Paula's done training days at different camps and things here in the UK and around the world, but she's never done her own specific marathon training day. So we were the first company, New Levels Coaching, were the first company to bring that to life. It was an idea Paula had when she joined us as a coach ambassador for the year, and it was great to see it come to fruition. And yeah, the weather presented some challenges. We had plan A, plan B, C, D, just about everything you could imagine. And then it was actually the slush that saved us because the track was quite icy, quite slippery, but then the water came down and it made it quite slushy and wet. So apart from wet feet, everyone had a great time. And it was fantastic. Like people training with Paula Radcliffe on a track that is named after her, and her smashing out a session, but also quite fitting that she's training for Tokyo and Boston so she can go and collect her 6 marathon stars. Like her being in a different place and doing that amongst people who she's going to be racing with, it was just, incredible to see. And it was quite an honour to, see our team do such a good job at putting that on. And I want to give a huge shout out to them because they were absolutely brilliant. Huge amount of effort went into it. And I'm just so glad everyone had a brilliant weekend.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such an amazing thing to be associated with and such a great person to have there. So yeah, no, credit to you guys. That's incredible. As you were talking, I'm thinking, who's the trail equivalent of Paula Radcliffe that we need to get out to like Morzine? And I suppose it's Killian or Courtney. Well, it's Courtney, isn't it?
I think that's two good comparisons. Yeah, in the female world, Courtney, without a doubt. I guess the only difference is Courtney is still competing at the highest level. But yeah, if you go to all-time greats, someone like a Killian or a Francois would certainly be up there on the men's side. That would be something, wouldn't it? Imagine getting them out for a Chamonix trail camp.
Hey, I mean, I'm not sure it gets bigger than Paula. So if we got Paula, I feel like we could get anyone in theory. So yeah, no, that's exciting. I mean, the other thing that I wanted to get a bit of an update on was the race that you had. So I know on the last episode, we talked about yours and Gemma's builds into your upcoming races. I know that Gemma's racing Arc of Attrition, actually probably in a few weeks. I know it's January time, and then she's off to Chianti in Italy to race there with a training camp in Trans-Gran Canaria. Not in Trans-Gran Canaria, on Gran Canaria, in between. But you did mention that you were going to go and race a 5K on New Year's Eve at Battersea at the podium event. I mean, I know how you got on, but do you want to give us a little race recap? People might be interested to hear about your running prowess.
Yeah, it was a good event. It was actually really good. And the first time myself and Gemma have raced kind of in the same race for a very long time. Obviously, we separated men's and women's elite fields, but Gemma did great. She ran 16:33 to finish 8th in a very competitive women's field. You know, Olympians in there at the front end and some Team GB cross country representatives. So she had a good run in the middle of ultra training. 2 weeks on 2 weeks on Saturday is the arc of attrition for her. So yeah, she spun the legs, and that was my first competitive 5K road race for over 5 years, which was mad when I look back. I was really surprised at how long I'd spent away from like really competitive high-end running, and to be back in an elite field, it was quite nerve-wracking actually, not going to lie.
Really?
I was quite nervous, but I was also very excited, and that realised how much I do love racing, particularly when I'm fit, because I feel like I can do something. And yeah, it went well. I ran 14:28. Gemma was 16:33, so I was 14:28, a couple of minutes ahead of the wife, which is always good because I get bragging rights in the house for a while. And
what do you think's better there objectively? 16:33 for a woman or 14:28 for a man, or are they ballpark? What's that conversion?
Yeah, actually, they're pretty ballpark. Maybe Gemma's is slightly better. In fact, I looked at the rankings for Vet 35s for the year, because it obviously fell on December the 31st, and I think it ranked Gemma third in the UK for 335s, and I think it ranked me 9th or 10th. So yeah, not far off. I'd say Gemma's is probably slightly better. But yeah, and I was 15th in the race. She was 8th. But yeah, it was just great to be competitive again. I set off 5th from the back, made my way through, paced it pretty even, finished the last 2K nice and strong, which is always a tactic that I like to employ on race day. I like to finish strong and pass people, and not a single person passed me in the race from my first K to the end. So that's always a positive.
Nice. Yeah, that's something we got in common. I think we both kind of value that quite a lot, right? Just only progressing, not getting past it. It's such a nice feeling.
It's amazing. Like, I can't tell people how important that is psychologically, to be going past everybody and not feeling like you're going backwards, or people not chasing you down. You just feel free. You feel like you're the one making moves, but also you do make positive moves as a result. Like, you're going past people and they're slowing down, so it makes you feel like you're going faster, and you're probably only maintaining the same speed, right? But they're just slowing down.
That's what the marathon has always been to me. It's like a game of leapfrog. You see someone in the distance, over the next 5K, you close that 200-meter gap, and then you realize I'm actually moving better. So you tuck in for a minute and you think, if I'm being honest, I could probably push on a bit, and then you go past, and it's like, it just gamifies it almost.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally you're in a pack and they're dragging you along, but realistically it tends to not happen as often. But yeah, I mean, that's class. The race looked amazing. I saw some of the stuff on socials it was like a bit of a photo finish, wasn't it, between the two winners? A bit of a sprint over the line, which is cool.
Yeah, it was a good race. Yeah, the men's went right to the wire, literally. Tarragano just got the nod, like literally just over Tom Keane, I think it was. Sprint finish, and it was a cool concept. It was a nice fast course. It was actually quite windy. People remember New Year's Eve. It was very blustery, but Battersea is quite sheltered, and the course they designed meant it was quite sheltered. The women got the worst of the weather by far, but we'd done a lot of training, like not really worrying about conditions in the trails, and not really focusing on time and splits and those sort of things. And I honestly think that helped, because just went into it just saying, well, let's just run to effort and feel like we have been for months on end now. And I think that massively helps when people are becoming obsessed with splits and times. It just goes out the window. Just run to feel and try and finish as high up as you possibly can.
And is that what you did? You weren't looking at pace or splits on your watch? Were you looking at like K markers on the course, or were you just gauging it by feel the whole time?
Feel, yeah, entirely feel. Had no idea what the splits were. I heard the commentator at one point say this group is on for kind of 14:35-ish or whatever, and I didn't really know if he was referring to my group. I thought he might be, but I had no idea as to what time I was going to run. And then, used the markers on course to help judge with my effort. And then with 2K to go, made a conscious effort of, okay, come on, pick it up a little bit now. And then with a K to go, really kind of tried to put the hammer down and catch as many people as I could, and just kept progressing through. But yeah, it was literally all to effort. And then I only know the split because one guy who I cooled down with, Louis, who I'd just met on the race day. We were together on one of the photos, and he said to me what his split through a K was, which was about 2:55. So, I did pretty much even pace it. I just finished strong over the last 2K, but 2:55 equates to 14:35, and I ran 14:28. So I picked up a little bit. But what's amazing, I was 52nd of 57 at that kilometre mark, and I went on to finish 15th. So it shows how many people go off too fast.
I mean, I imagine that's pretty standard fare in a 5K, though, isn't it? I mean, I still remember mid-Cheshire, I was probably passing the 1K split. I must have been, I couldn't even guess, 70th. Do you know what I mean? And then finished top 10 or whatever. I can't even remember, but passing so many people in the middle of the race, and it's just like a class feeling. Well, the last thing before we move off this race is, I think the last episode we talked about shoes. It might have been the one prior to that, I'm not sure. But we talked about Vaporflies, super shoes, and you kind of said you'd got a pair, you're going to use them for the race. You'd done like a session in them. So go on, what's the verdict? Are you a super responder?
Yeah, I think I'm a good responder. I think the fact I don't train in them a lot helps. I've only put them on for 2 sessions and the race. So yeah, I think that helps me. I did put them on, actually no, 3 sessions. I did put them on for a slower tempo session, and I found that a little bit more tricky than running fast in them. I found running fast just very natural in them. I found running a bit more controlled, a little bit more difficult. I soon got used to it, but yeah, I like them. They definitely add something compared to the shoes that I used to race in, like completely different ball game. Who knows what it is in terms of time and quantifying that, but I'm not about quantifying it. I'm just like, it is what it is. The world's changed and it's great. It's fun and it makes it exciting, and that's what sport's got to be about in my eyes.
Yeah. Totally. It's like we were talking about the UTMB index changes. They've finally come out and kind of said, yeah, we dropped them because people were starting to approach that 1,000 score. I know we've talked about indexes loads and people probably don't really care, but it is interesting to know that when you're looking back at results from 3 to 5 years ago or older, they are higher than they would be today for that same performance. Like, it's important to kind of recognize that. But it's the same thing. As long as you just make a change across the board and everyone's aware of it and everyone's got access to whatever that advantage or change might be, it doesn't really matter. You're all on an even playing field. Like, yeah, your 5K time in those shoes is amplified versus what it would be in non-super shoes, but everyone else is wearing super shoes, so it doesn't really matter. And
exactly.
They're just fun.
Yeah. Like you mentioned something on one of the episodes pre-Christmas where you're like, I just like running fast, and I think it brought that feeling back to me. I like running fast, and they make you feel fast, and everybody likes that, right? There's nobody out there who doesn't really like running fast or feeling like you've got both feet off the ground, and if they help towards that, then great. A few people said to me, "Oh, what do you think? You would have ran in the super shoes like when you were racing?" And I was like, I'm not really bothered. I don't care. It just is what it is, and I don't know. I love the fact we can still go and do what we love, and it doesn't matter if it's slower or faster than what it used to be. You can just still feel good, even at the ripe old age of 37 and going on 38.
There you go. Still life in the legs yet. So, I mean, moving on from that, obviously, what's the thought behind doing a 5K road race? I know that I've been doing a lot of kind of flatter running. That's more because of the kind of come back from injury, ease back into things and not kind of change too many variables, which I'm aware of. But we also recently had conversations around, like, I want to take part in the 12-stage relays for the RunThrough team. We've got a 12-man squad together for the Southern Relays in March. And then also I'd quite like to go and race a road 10K at Nantwich. 1, because it's like hometown. I'm going to be there anyway. But 2, because I do think it sits quite nicely with canyons. But yeah, obviously interested in your input on that and that transition from shorter, faster 5K, 10K, even half marathon road running as part of the build into the trail season. Like, how does that fit?
Yeah, I've always been a big believer that you need some speed, and that speed needs to translate over any distance. I don't think it's as crucial as you go longer. We don't see the fastest athletes necessarily winning everything, because I think durability plays such a big part. And by that, I mean, you've got to be able to handle the distance, and the body's got to be able to handle the distance. And when we go to ultra trail in particular, we see a lot of different variables that play a part. But there is a strong correlation between velocity of VO2 max and VO2 max and the best performances in ultra trail races. And the research that's been done in that area shows a positive correlation between finishing position and VO2 max and velocity of VO2 max. So if we take that into consideration, what that's saying is the people who have the higher VO2 maxes and can run faster, that given speed at VO2 max, they're more likely to finish higher in those ultra races as well. So I'm a big believer that we should still develop that system and racing 5Ks and 10Ks and even 3Ks. I know some people do that on the track as well, some ultra runners. But more so going through a training block that focuses on developing that VO2 max and that velocity VO2 max can help with overall performance. So for Gemma in particular, it was just a phase of training that we've gone through, which was coming to an end. So let's go and test it, see where you are. And she's ballpark pretty much where she's always been, which is great because she's training for an ultra, but she's still as fast as she's ever been. And I think that's one of the messages I want to get across as well. Like, I did 3 road sessions before that 5K, and people become obsessed with the track and road and say, if I'm not on the track and the road, I can't run fast. Well, you can, because we just did loads of hills and loads of tempo and threshold work and then some VO2 max hills. And I tell you now, you feel strong as an ox when you stand on that start line, and there's no speed being compromised with that stuff. So I think it always fits in there at some point, but I think you've got to be strategic about how you do it. And with you, that's what we're doing now, because you're going to go out to canyons in America, and that's going to be an even faster race than what we see here. So you've got to be not just durable for the distance, you've got to be durable and conditioned to handle the speed over the distance. So ultimately, you've got to be able to run fast.
Yeah, 100. It feels way more translatable. And I think, go back to time. As you're talking, I'm thinking about related back to time. If a 10K is a 30-minute race and Canyons is a 3.5-hour race, that is, oh my God, what is that as a percentage? It's like a seventh, whatever. Let's say it's 15% of the distance or whatever. There's still enough correlation there. If you're talking about racing a 1500 to prep for a 100 miler, there's probably too big of a differential for that to make as big of an impact. But when you do look at David Roach and Tom Evans are the two that immediately come to mind for me, who really focus on, everyone's periodizing training, right? And they're not doing these short, fast efforts necessarily right before they're doing the longer races, or maybe they are. But Tom going to World Cross and being that kind of standard on a shorter distance, 30-minute type race, VO2 max type effort. And David Roach obviously saying like, ultra races are track meets and, all this sort of stuff he's coming out with. It's clearly translating because there's two of the best runners in the world at what they do at the longer stuff. Yeah. So undoubtedly it's beneficial. And I think before people I don't think anyone's ever disagreed and said, no, fitness, VO2 max type fitness and your ability to run fast on shorter distances has no translation. It definitely translates, but it's like, at what point is it diminishing returns and what's actually transferable and valuable? But I do think for Canyons, being in good 10K shape is directly translatable.
Yeah, and I think it's like I think the key to it is being in good 10K shape without compromising your objective and your training strategy for the big goal race. So as long as you're in good 10K shape and you're fit enough to perform well over 50K, then that's the key. Like, I saw Katie Scheid, she's probably a good person to compare to the likes of Tom and David Roach. She put out a 10K, I think last week, and ran like 34 low, which I wouldn't say is world class. I would say is like a national standard 10K. But for Katie Scheid, who's won UTMB in Western States last year, again, it's probably confirmation that that's good enough. And I can still run a fast 10K. Like, that is still a fast 10K for a female. There's a lot of people who'll be listening thinking, God, well, that's super fast. But we know the best in the world are running 31 and under now, even under 30 at the top end. But it's quick enough for her and it does translate. But I think it also shows you that, so for someone like you who sat there, and I would take a bit of confidence from that and think, well, you know what? It also shows that I can be very good over the longer distances and I don't necessarily have to be the best 10K runner in the world, but I still have to have some of that quality without a doubt.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's almost the opposite. It's to be in peak 3.5-hour race shape, you probably can run a decent 10K. Yeah. So it's almost more that way. Like, it's the prioritization of what you're actually trying to achieve. But yeah, well, we'll find out, I suppose.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, because you've
course
got
records 30-30. Yeah, course records 30-30 at Nantwich. So
is it nice?
That seems doable. So we'll see. But yeah, cool. I mean, it is just interesting. It's also just fun to mix it up as well. Like I've really enjoyed kind of flatter runs, running a bit more on the road recently. It's a nice change, isn't it? And then you get even more excited when the days start to get a bit longer, the sun comes out and you can get out into the mountains and it's a bit more fun because short dark days and like muddy slogs through wet fields, it's fine, but it's not like the most fun thing in the world. So, yeah, time and a place.
I think that's a really good point, actually, because you've got to know what you like, and you've been very good at this recently and saying, this is what I like to do and this is what I want to do. And you're saying there, like, I've really enjoyed going flat and fast again and mixing it up, and I still like getting out on the trails. And like, it was interesting, Gemma's response to going on the road and running a bit faster. She was just like, nah, get me back on the trails. And I was quite surprised by that, but I think it shows her mentality of like, I want to go up the distances now, and I feel like I belong on those trails. And don't get me wrong, she hates boggy fields and that type of thing, but alpine type trails and being in the mountains, she could go 7, 8, 9, 10 hours and like not be bothered. Where I think yourself and me, we fall into the category of like, we still like to run fast. So it probably tells you the type of runner that you could potentially be in the ultra trail world, because there's a lot of different distances you can attack now, which is a lot different to what it used to be.
Definitely. We've talked about that a lot. It's this kind of celebration of going up in distance, but not so much of an eye on the fact that you can just get faster at shorter stuff. And the question is always, when are you going to do a 100K? When are you going to do a 100 mile? But really, it could be, how fast can you run this 10 miler or whatever? Yeah. But then again, that's Golden Trail and all these shorter races that we see. It's all the up and down and uphill races. And to us, they're just as entertaining. It's maybe just not as mainstream as something like Western States and UTMB, which to capture the public attention, there's something incredible about the Spine, Dragon's Back. It's like, it's this odyssey, this epic journey. Yeah. It's a different storyline, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I was listening to the Free Trail Runner of the Year awards, and they're currently going on this month. But I was listening to kind of like the nominations and the justifications as to why people were in, and I found it fascinating. Like, if you looked at some of the different categories and who was in there, and like Jasmine Paris was in there for like the Barclays performance, and she was nominated for like the performance of the year. But then the trail runner of the year, like on the men's side, El Hassin was one of the big favourites, who does a lot of the shorter stuff. And then on the women's side, it was Katie Scheid, who like sits in the middle of like the longer one day stuff. And I thought, this is the beauty, isn't it, of trail running, is you've got all these great performances and these people who are nominated for trail runner of the year, but they're doing all these different disciplines. And I guess it's a bit like track and field. Like if you went track and field athlete of the year.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. Kipchoge, like, didn't he medal at the Olympics in 1500, or at least whatever? He was world-class 1500 runner, right? And then best marathoner ever. And as he got older, he progressed through the distances. It's quite normal.
Yeah, Kipchoge used to compete regularly over 5K against, Gebre Selassie Bekele, which is amazing, isn't it, when you think about how long he's been going. But yeah, he's put out a world-class 1500 metre time, which is 109 metres less than a mile. So his speed is there, and it transitions all the way up to the marathon. And it's similar with a lot of these trail runners, and they come from collegiate backgrounds in the US in particular, where they've ran fast as collegiate athletes, and now they're just going longer and longer and longer.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Well, then, I mean, the other thing that we've been chatting about recently is obviously training plans. So I think in the previous episode, we talked a little bit about future planning and kind of looking into, it's natural to come to the end of a year and look into the next year and kind of plan out a bit of a calendar and a bit of a schedule, and what are your A goals, what are your B goals, what are your C races, how's it all going to look, and how's that going to fit around life and stuff. So we touched on that. And I think to almost go one level below that, once you've got your plan, I think the next thing that we do a lot of is talking about how we're going to train to achieve these goals. So you set the goals and then you try and work out, right, how are we actually going to achieve these goals? And it's quite similar to, I won't use too much jargon, but some of the stuff we've been doing in the company at the moment, from a business point of view, is setting those business goals and then setting departmental goals and doing a bit of risk mitigation. So looking at a goal and saying, okay, so by the end of September 2025, Gemma would like to look back and have had a good performance at CCC. Whatever. Let's say that's a top 10 or whatever. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. Just to say a thing. That's the goal. So it's quite useful to then imagine yourself there now, having not achieved that, and list the reasons why you wouldn't have achieved it. Like, what things are going to get in my way of achieving that goal? And then think now proactively about how you can get ahead of those things and how you can avoid them causing problems. And I think we did that quite well last year, because we looked at what I wanted to do and we said, well, we don't live at elevation, we don't have access to much hot weather, and we don't have many hills to run up. So how are we going to mitigate those things? And it was use the sauna, use the treadmill, go on training trips, blah, 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 blah. So I just thought that might be kind of a cool thing to talk about, because I know you've got quite a lot of travel coming up this year. So have I. And you've thought quite a lot about prepping Gemma for, a 100K race in the high alpine of the French Alps when she lives in Loughborough, which she's at a disadvantage there. We've got to be honest, right? Like, from someone who lives there. So yeah, what's your thought process when you're kind of planning that out, other than just travel is fun and holidays are great and we love to go and do cool stuff? What's the kind of the coach's mindset with that?
Yeah, and I guess that is one part of it, isn't it? It's like, if you enjoy what you do and you can make it fun, then you're more likely to get better performances in my eyes. So going away and training is fantastic, especially if you've got the right people around you. And, we've spoken about that, even starting to put together groups. We've got a small group now, which we could go and train together, and just the positivity of that and thriving off each other and people pushing each other on in the right way, and can also create a lot of, a nice positive vibe, which can have a good impact on performance. And there was actually a few research studies quoted recently about whether the effects of high altitude training are purely because of the high altitude, or whether it's more to do with people getting together in the right environment and training together.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of there's still physiological benefits that go on internally as well, biological benefits that come from being at altitude, but they're saying you can get a lot of benefits as well just from going away with people. So that's quite interesting. But for me, it's like going back to what we were just talking about before. Through the winter here, yeah, we'll get on the trails and stuff, but then why not break that year-long season up with something different and run a bit faster? Because now's the time of year to do that. We're not in the high mountains and we've got some faster running available. So let's do that within that period of training. And that's why you see a lot of people doing the same, particularly in the UK, in the same way, like, the Norwegians or some of the Swedish athletes will be out doing ski more, because that's what they've got access to. So they take advantage of that. But then going away on camps, I think it's just really important to look at, well, what are the specific demands of the event and how are we going to get better at those things, and where do we need to go to get better at them? So Chianti could be warm in March in Italy. So let's go to Gran Canaria in February and do a little bit of a block of warm weather, and also get a good bit of elevation on similar terrain, right? You've been out there, James. It's pretty runnable, isn't it? But it's quite nice as well underfoot.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's perfect for that. I mean, we wanted to go back, didn't we? I would have gone if I wasn't also then going to California, because that's such a big trip. But we said it when we left last year: stable weather, big elevation, decent runnable trails, but also a lot of technicality. So it's a bit of a slap in the face after like a boggy, muddy British winter to go out and actually run on some rocky technical trails, because that's a lot of what that alpine terrain is going to be like in the Alps in the summer. Chianti may be different, obviously, but then Chianti in itself is a B goal. So yeah, it's all this gradual build, isn't it?
And that's a good word to use, actually, like a gradual build into it and slowly progressing things. And Chianti is part of building towards 100K, because that's 72K. And then eventually spending a lot of time in the mountains in the summer, like a big period of time in the mountains. So much so we're even discussing me not being there, because I'll have to come home for work and Gemma will work remotely. But, I think it's super important if you're going to put a big goal out there. You described that quite well. Like, what are the risk factors of not achieving that goal? Well, if they're the risk factors, how can we eliminate them? And then you've got to eliminate them if you're serious about your goals, and you've got to go after them. You don't want to get there and think, I've not done everything possible. So we've just had to have a serious conversation about that. And, with you, it's like slightly different. Before you go out to America, it's like, well, it could be warm out in America. So we're already having conversations about, when do we put the treadmill in? When do we put the treadmill and sauna in? How do we start to get those heat mitigation strategies in there that's going to help you prepared for warmer conditions, just in case? It might not be warm, but we have to consider that, right?
Totally. You were also talking about the condensed window of, maybe you'll correct me, but gaining physiological gains through heat acclimatization, whether that's like sauna, running on the treadmill with extra layers, or being somewhere that's hot, but then how quickly that disappears. So actually it's something that you can kind of implement through training in the build up. But then as long as you get to the place for a decent period of time before, and you spend a bit of time in those conditions, like sitting out in the sun while you're resting and recovering and trying to kind of be active and do some easy runs in the hotter weather, if that's what it's going to be, actually is probably adequate, because then you're getting it immediately in the lead up to the race, like we had in Chamonix. Like I felt so good with that temperature after doing some easy running and doing a bit of sunbathing, as stupid as that sounds. And obviously then also factoring in the idea that during a taper before a race, you're trying to rest and recover, and sitting in the sun actually isn't that great recovery because it's quite taxing on your body. So doing it kind of smartly, not just battering yourself. But that's the plan with going on such a long trip in America, is because I've got sort of 8-9 days before the race actually there. So that's time to get over the jet lag, shake the legs out. And if it is hot, I've got a week in that nice hot weather to do what I can to kind of absorb those gains and feel prepped, rather than just kind of rocking up and it being a real shock to the system. Kind of like how Chris Jones looked in Gran Canaria last year when he was just, oh my God, he was dying. It was so hot, man.
But then he looked a lot better in Chamonix when it was probably hotter on the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And, he'd done that race in Gran Canaria, he'd done some heat mitigation at home. I spoke to Doug, who came onto the New Levels Coaching Podcast, who he works with a part of the elite trail team. They've been quite strategic about those heat strategies going into Chamonix. But also that's kind of the key to it, really. It's a bit like altitude training. If you can do little bouts of it through the year and keep getting hits of it, you just become better at it, and you adjust quicker when you then get there. So then being out before the race, he'd adjusted, but he'd also done the heat strategies beforehand, which had all contributed towards then being better in warmer conditions on the day, which ultimately you guys did face, because it was like 28 degrees by the time you were 2 hours into a race, which was mad.
Yeah, the heat was the main thing that everybody was talking about. I mean, the one factor with canyons as well, which is kind of interesting, is that such an early start time for a 50K at 6 a.m. And it's a 3.5 hour race, so I'm going to be finished for breakfast. So yeah, I mean, we'll see kind of how all that plays in, but it is interesting to see. Well, just to talk a little bit about how we think about that stuff, because a lot of it is just what we want to do with our lives is spend time with people that we like, in cool places, doing fun stuff and setting ourselves big lofty goals and testing ourselves and seeing if we can achieve them. Like I know that's like how I feel, how you feel, how Gemma feels, and probably a lot of people listening to this podcast as well. So, anything you can do to structure your life around things that make you happy, what's the point in doing anything else? So yeah, that is a huge part of it.
And I think important to say to people as well, you don't have to be elite to do that. We run, as part of our New Levels Coaching, our runner retreats, we run camps, retreats, workshops for runners of all abilities who come because they want to better themselves, but they also want to be around positive, like-minded people. And it's not about doing it because you want to be an elite athlete. It's doing it because you want to be the best version of you. And it doesn't matter what standard you are. If you're going to stand on start lines and you've got lofty goals, then why not give yourself the best chance? But whilst you're doing that, why not go and have some fun with it as well? Because that's what makes it more enjoyable. That's what makes the process better. And that, for me, is always more likely to get a positive result if you've enjoyed the process, the training process.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. So then going back to what you mentioned about like the study that was done on the impact of altitude training versus just training in a group, and the fact that you're away with a team of people, whatever, that kind of brings us on quite nicely to the next bit I wanted to chat about, because we've been having conversations recently about this kind of little training group that you've built. So I know that you put the call out a couple of months back now for any elite trail runners who wanted to come on board with NLC, because you're trying to build a little bit of a elite trail team. And I know you got Bertie on board and had interest from other people, some of whom have kind of joined in that capacity, some who have come on as paid coaching clients and kind of range of different things. But you guys you've got a bit of a group going now, haven't you? People who can get out with Gemma and do some of the long runs and maybe do some sessions together.
Yeah, we've got a nice little group in Loughborough, and that's growing. I've always had the group here, the kind of track and road group, but the trail group is growing as well, with Ben and Gemma and myself, and then Chris jumps in as well. He's like marathon focused, so he does a bit of the longer stuff. And then we've got Bertie, who's over in the peaks as well, and then Joe's over kind of Derbyshire way. So we're looking at linking together for a long run this weekend, and there'll be 4 or 5 of us going out on that long run. I think it does make a difference, just organising something. Do you want to go for breakfast afterwards? And again, there's been research done in that area about yes, it's important to get your fuel into you after a run, and that's one part of it. but they also saw big benefits of people actually meeting up for coffee and whatever it is, some food after a run, because of that social element, that social bonding. And then that promotes, I don't know, it must be something within the body. I don't know the scientifics behind it, but it promotes something in there that just helps promote recovery. And yeah, I just want to create that good vibe. So I was saying to you, like, is there a date where we can all get together, bring you up from the south, and or we come down that way, and then we make a bit of a weekend of it. We go and stay somewhere and we just share some ideas. I think it's just so powerful. I really do.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to it, man. I loved, to be honest, most of my like running career has been very solo, but I always loved the group sessions we did in Canada. I always loved when we got like the track sessions going with Nantwich Running Club, and even just the easy jog Wednesday night, like with the group of lads running around an 8-minute mile. And it's just fun. It is so much more fun. And obviously coming up to run with you guys is always a blast, and going away as a group and all getting out together is, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love it anyway, but it does just add a whole other level. And I think for me, the majority of the benefit that I see when I can get into a session with the right people is just that accountability. There's just a reality of, where you sit in that group, kind of the effort you need to put in, and everyone is just silently holding each other accountable, because like I'm doing a session with Carl, like Carl's not coming past me. But if he's having a really good day and I'm feeling a bit lazy, he might be a little bit close. So it's just that kind of nudge along. Or when we did that hill session on Lewis Hill or whatever, I'm like, no, Lewis isn't coming past. But I had to work pretty hard, and maybe I ended up working a bit harder than I would if you weren't there, which is great. So yeah, I think there's huge benefits. It's something that I don't sort of stress about too much because it's not something I really have access to. I think if I was doing a lot more road stuff, I'd have more people at work to train with, and I could go to Aldershot or whatever. Maybe that's something that in my life, based on like some life changes through this year, I'll have the opportunity to change that significantly, and I can actually find some people who I can train with who are like better than me. That sounds like I don't mean like, I can't find people better than me, but it is a little bit tricky to line up with those people, because there's not that many people running on trails at that level in Farnham. Well, I mean, there's probably none. I don't know.
That's the tricky bit, isn't it? They're all spread out all over the country, but it might, you're going to go for a run, bit of a session with work colleague Kieran, who I support, who's training for a marathon, ironically on the same day as you're going to do canyons. And it might be that sometimes getting out and doing a tempo on the same day is going to fit well, because he's going to have to be in good shape, and we're going to have to push his tempo and his threshold, and we're going to have to push your tempo and your threshold. So it might work well to at least warm up together and be together in that environment, even though you might be slightly apart because of the differential in pace that you're running. But even just being together and doing something together can help, can't it?
Yeah. I mean, better than anybody, all these things are ranges anyway. So there's a time and a place. Like you could sit at like slightly easier tempo and someone's at higher end tempo touching into the bottom of threshold. It's not that you're getting a hugely different stimulus. It might just be nice to run together and share pulling each other along a little bit. Like, it's just a nice thing to do.
I think, mentality is important, because nothing worse than having a bad day in training, right, where you're just not feeling it. But I used to love when I was in a group, and I would give this advice to anybody, like, rather than see it as like, oh, so-and-so behind me who I usually beat is going to be running with me or coming past me. I used to see that as like a huge benefit. It's like, I'm not having the greatest day yet. I feel a bit rubbish. You know what? I can get a bit of help from my mates to get me through here, because there's going to be a day when I feel good and I can push on. But today I'm just not quite feeling it. So I'm just going to drop back, get in the group, enjoy being with them, and take the pressure off myself. But you have to have a strong mentality to do that. But you've just hit the nail on the head. You've also got to understand the purpose of the session, because if you're running too hard and you're going out of those zones you want to train, then it's pointless anyway. So you might as well just drop back, because that zone's so big. You want the benefit from it.
Totally. You got to look at the bigger picture. You got to think about what you're trying to achieve with that session. Keep one eye on the long-term goal. These are all things that we've learned that are like obvious, but I've found, like with anything that I read about or learn about or care about, which is basically like my family, my running, and my job, it's a lot of repetitive stuff. Like I'm thinking about a lot of the same ideas. I'm going back through like my notes sometimes and bringing up stuff that I almost feel like I've just come up with it. Oh, I've just had this realization, and then I'll find a note from 3 years ago where I wrote the same thing down. But I think that's just life. Like, human memory is kind of flawed, and it's recency bias is definitely a thing. And it's also like, it's called the knowledge crisis, where it's really hard to recognize the things that you used to not know that you now know. So like for us sat here right now, a lot of the things we're talking about, running to effort and like the purpose of a session and all this stuff, is so obvious. We talk about it all the time. It's your job, like it's your vocation, and we talk about it all the time. Whereas when I came on as a coaching client with you at the very start, it took us a few months for me to understand what running to effort really felt like, and to understand the purpose of what the sessions were for. And I still talk to people now who are good runners who will push an easy run too hard, which will then impact the session they've got the next day. And they've actually failed on the purpose of both of those runs by trying to put effort in. So there's so much to it. And a lot of it you can kind of get away with. But I think if you're trying to optimize and you're really trying to perform to the best you can, regardless of your level, like perform to your best ability, just considering that stuff and thinking about every single day, what am I trying to achieve today with my running? If it's an easy recovery day, focus on that. Make sure you're getting your food in, make sure you're sleeping, go 30 seconds a K easier. It makes literally no difference at all. And then run the session the next day a bit harder, because that's a hard session. So yeah, I mean, whatever. Not exactly reinventing the wheel, but good stuff to remind yourself of constantly.
Yeah, because we always want to go away from the basics, but it's the basics that get, just stacking them, just time after time after time. Somebody asked me down the track last night, like, oh, what have you done differently to run that 14:28? Like, I didn't think you were in that decent shape. I said, you know what? I've not really done anything differently. I was like, I've just been doing the same stuff. And it's like, probably the only thing I've done differently is I've been getting more sleep than I usually do, and been taking care of myself a little bit better. And that probably is the biggest thing. But that's the most simple thing. And I've known that for years, but maybe I've not done it as well for years.
Yeah, eat well, sleep well, do your pre-run exercises, try and run the effort that you're supposed to do on your races. Be honest with your coach, be honest with yourself about how your body feels. If something's a bit sore, don't not say, because you don't want to have to skip a day, because it's better to skip one day than 5. Like, just it's basic stuff.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what we got to nail. Cool. Well, have you got anything else coming up in the next? Obviously, you've got Gemma's race coming up. You said you're out for a long run at the weekend. Is that Peaks again? You're doing the loop, the Lady Bower loop?
No, we're staying local this weekend, just to try and get, like, again, a bit faster runnable trails. We've done a lot up there now, and they're 2 weeks out, so don't want to go chasing crazy elevation, but want to spin the legs a little bit. So yeah, we're gonna stay local this weekend, which will be nice. And then races come thick and fast. We got the Arc coming up. I'm going to do a local trail race the following week. I say local trail race. I rocked up last year and Tom Evans won it, so that puts it into perspective. What the local standard is around here. So it might be local, but it can still be highly competitive. But yeah, then all eyes are on kind of those big spring goals for all my athletes. Like you're heading out to the States. We've got Gemma's going out to Chianti. Got some other athletes in Chianti as well. We've got big marathon season coming up. So I'm in that phase now of long-term planning with everyone and looking at how the next few months and beyond look. So it's an exciting time for me as a coach, because this. I know it shouldn't be new year, new you. I don't believe in that, but it is a good time to sit down and map everything out.
Yeah, it's such a natural break. It's so hard because I hate it. Think like this all the time. It shouldn't make any difference. Today's today, tomorrow's tomorrow. That's really all that matters. It's one more day. Same with like birthdays and, I feel so much older. Well, you don't. You're a day older than you were when you woke up yesterday. But naturally, it is just, you get a new calendar. You're writing a new date on the diary. Kind of just is what it is, isn't it? It's the way it kind of falls.
That's me tomorrow. It's my birthday tomorrow. Just another day. So yeah, that's the first thing that comes. So I'm a step closer to the age, the 40 category, which is worrying.
Yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? It is pretty bad. But also, I mean, it means nothing. It's one day. You just ran, you didn't run anywhere close to a PB, but whatever, you ran a 5-year PB, let's say. You're in the best shape you've been in for a while, so that's good. But yeah, no, for me, at the minute, I think coming back into the consistent training has been a huge thing and feeling good. I did mention like my back before, so long story short, it seems like a lot of the driving is causing some issues, which we sort of knew. And now we did some testing, driving some different cars and stuff. And it seems to have actually just made a really like tangible impact. So we've solved that. Feeling good today. Got this bit of a session tomorrow to do with Kieran, like you said, which is nice. And go from there. Ran today, felt totally fine. So we'll work it out, mate.
Which
But
is always
outside of that,
which is always music to my ears because we can get back on plan. But it is mad, isn't it? Like, it's worth some people looking at that. You know, you literally drove up to ours and were like, mate, you're not going to believe this. I've done 2 long drives and my back is agony. Like,
yeah, it's mad. So I borrowed my dad's truck for 6 weeks to test the theory of if I'm driving around in this taller vehicle with a higher seat with my legs flatter, you know, like the position that the physios kind of recommended, to basically reduce how compressed my hip flexors are, is my understanding of it. So I wanted to drive a different vehicle that wasn't mine for a while and see how that changed it. And no issues at all. Body feeling amazing. Like all the training starting to build back up, just everything feeling great. And then took it back to him at Christmas, stayed up there for Christmas, and then drove back down in my own car. And instantly that entire week started to have issues, and then drove up to yours and just went for an easy jog and couldn't stand up straight. It's tough, but like you say, problem solving. There's a variable that we can change. So the next day I just swap my car. So it's done. So now I've got another car that's more. Yeah.
Which I love. I said that to Gemma. I was like, I love that. Problem solved. Done. It's like,
Just got. I mean, it's in my control. Like, you know, it wake up all mopey, like, oh, my back's sore, oh, here we go again. But it doesn't matter. Like, what's the cause? Fix that one thing, reassess, keep going. That's what we got to do. I think that's the only mindset you can have. Otherwise, it just becomes kind of a bit mopey, doesn't it? But that's it for me. It's just we were on such a good track. I missed like 3 days. It's not a massive deal. So just continuing to ease back into that. I think the next variable that comes in is going to be putting in some intensity into the hills through training and see how that impacts the body, because that's the only other thing really that we think could possibly be a thing. So around that, just making sure that I'm getting my sleep and doing all of my exercises and stretches, which I am still on track to be able to sit cross-legged comfortably by the end of the year. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but if I can do that, that would be a massive thing because I'm so far from it. But I'm doing those stretches multiple times every day, so that's all I can do. And to be honest, it's a really busy period for work. I mentioned all the goal setting. It's a time of year where events are quite quiet, so it's the one break that we get to kind of reset and reassess. And we've done a bit of recruitment. We've got a load of new events coming in. We've got a load of new staff on board. And I'm having a big look at how we can improve stuff from a run-through point of view for the staff and like more process-driven stuff, which is probably quite boring, but to me is quite interesting. And will have the long-term effect of saving a lot of people a lot of time. So I'm investing quite a lot of my time in that in the short term, alongside what I'm up to. But one thing that I did do trail-related this week was I was a podcast guest rather than a host.
Nice.
So, I got invited onto the Couch to Coached podcast, and essentially we had a chat. Basically what it is 2 Midlands blokes. I think one was Birmingham, one was Stoke, or ish. And they're mates, and one of them's coached by the other. And he basically entered Tittersworth 50k on a Black Friday deal. And the guy who coaches him said, "You're an idiot. What are you doing? You know, you've only run a marathon. You don't know what you're taking on." And he said, "All right, well, if I can get someone from RunThrough onto the podcast to talk to us about it, then you're going to have to run it with me." So I came along, and now they're both racing. So we had a good chat about Tittersworth and about transitioning from the marathon into trail running, and some questions around what to expect. And it was cool speaking to someone who, with all due respect, literally has no idea that was the point of the conversation. And just explaining some basics around, just to be honest, the first thing is like the time that we talk about and the nutrition. And they were just asking around differences in training between marathon and ultra distance trail running. And yeah, just it was quite an interesting chat. And I think those guys represent what a lot of the Run Through Trails market is, which is passionate runners who are part of clubs and running groups, and they're really into it. And they're stepping up into that trail thing just because it's aspirational. It's just cool. Yeah. It's the same reason that we said people want to go longer and longer and longer, because it's a challenge that feels achievable, but is also a bit scary, but also seems like it's going to be pretty fun. So for anyone listening who's not run a trail race, get yourself signed up to one of the Run Through Trails Summit Series events this year. We've got a ton of them all year long. They're all going to be class. And they're all really unique and different in their own way. So yeah, by all means, get signed up, check out the website, runthroughtrails.com. And if you've got any questions, ping them in, and maybe we could do a little bit of a Q&A about some trail running questions on one of the podcasts. Maybe that could be quite cool.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be really good. Yeah, send them in. That'd put us on the spot a little bit.
All right, nice. We'll do that next time. I'll get George and Jamie to get a post out on socials to gather some questions, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A next episode. I can hear the shuffling of a man removing his clothes, ready for the life during class. So I better make a move before I'm just in the way. But no, I think that's been great, mate. It's nice to have a catch up. Like you say, we saw each other just recently anyway, but let's get back on track, and hopefully I can get up for one of those lovely NLC trail running group runs in the next few weeks.
Sounds good. Get out of there before they have you down as a nude model for this live drawing class.
Yeah, I'm not in that shape right now. We'll save that for the summer. Right. All right, mate. Pleasure as always. Thanks to everyone for listening. Hopefully that's interesting for you all. We'll definitely, if you do have any questions, shoot them through to us on a DM on the RunThrough Trails Instagram, or email in, or whatever you want to do, and we'll collect them up. And that's what we'll do next week, a bit of a Q&A led episode, or in 2 weeks. So yeah, nice one. All right, Lewis. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, James. See ya.
Nice one. See ya.